Hello, people. Welcome to the United Stand and welcome to another episode of the Flex Files. I'm here joined with my good friend James Cooper. How are you doing in isolation, man?
Yeah, it's all right, isn't it? It's a different sort of idea, different mentality. I think for me, getting out every morning and having a run is the most precious part of my day. I've managed to rack about 50 miles a week.
50.
It's important, and I know it's great. It's just your thinking time. It's working out what's going on the day ahead. I think that's the most precious time, and I think the wonderful thing about it is that so many people are out there doing stuff, albeit 2 meters apart from everybody else. Of course, he adds very quickly.
And you know what? The weather's getting better as well. So you've seen a few Wallies kind of being out sunbathing and having barbecues and parties and stuff. But hopefully that the weather getting better doesn't encourage people to make the wrong decisions, because we've got to stay in and beat this thing, haven't we?
No, I think you're right, and I think the curse for us in Manchester, I think the police and all the services here would have been hoping it was Manchester weather to keep people inside, with rain and grey skies, and it's not been that at all. It's been blue skies.
Yeah.
No problem. In terms of people getting out and doing what they're meant to be doing or what they're allowed to be doing, it's nice to see families together. It's nice to see people just sort of, I think, just taking a little bit more time in their lives, really. And I hope, the knock-on effect of all this is we're a little less manic than we were maybe when we went into it. I think, that hopefully is a knock-on thing that families are more important. I've got two boys, and when they were born, you were given 2 weeks off to spend time with them. Well, I've already had 3 weeks sort of and touch wood, it's been great, and it's been lovely spending time with them. And I think we'll never, hopefully, touch wood, also get that again, because obviously these are unprecedented times. You just hope it doesn't happen again, but you've got to make the best of it. And certainly, if we all come out stronger as families, which I think the majority of people will, then I think that'd be a nice thing about it.
Absolutely, we've got to take the positives in what is a really difficult time worldwide, haven't we? But we've got to talk about how it affects football. That's what we're here to do. You knew we was going to get there. Solskjaer's come out and in an interview with you guys actually over at Sky with Gary Neville. Gary Neville cleared up quite well, I think, the term he used, which was the word exploit, which I think that was probably the wrong word to use for that. But I think where he was trying to go was with it is that, is what's happening with the pandemic going to affect Manchester United and their transfer activity, starting with Jadon Sancho? Big money move it will be if it is to happen. There's a lot of noises that it could and will happen. Is what's going on going to affect that?
Yeah, before we go on to that, let me ask you a question. How long did it take you to miss football? It took me about 10 days. First 10 days were great.
Do you know what? I drive into every single game every week. I'm like, oh, this drive again. So it probably took me about 1 week. After one batch of fixtures that didn't happen, I was like, actually, this isn't coming back for a while. Then it got progressively worse from then.
All right, let's do football. I mean, Ollie was good enough to do it, and I think that's great. We are seeing kind of clubs take more of an opportunity to speak to people. I think players will be doing more, and managers are doing more, and I think they realise there's a need to keep people kind of informed, but also keeping people's morale up. And I think it does that. I think if he had his time again, he wouldn't use the word exploit. I think that was probably the wrong term to use. But I think, the interesting thing about it, I think Manchester United in the market go into the market probably more attracted to people than when they last went into a window. We know what they did in the last window, and it was amazing in terms of Bruno Fernandes. And I'm sure we'll get onto Ighalo and you teasing me for laughing at transfer.
Terrible person you are. Terrible.
Yeah, and I was stunned as well. And I've been stunned by his progress. So I'm a big enough man to admit that I was wrong, and he's proved me wrong, and I'm really glad that he has. But I think, United are more attractive. I think that's probably what Ollie was trying to say about things, that people can see kind of a way forward. They can see that they're tighter at the back. They're scoring goals throughout the team, but also up front. And I think what he's trying to say is that, as a proposition to other players, Manchester United are probably more attractive than they've ever been, certainly under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. You have to probably go back to, I think, little periods perhaps during Louis van Gaal, little periods again with Jose Mourinho, where life felt this good, where everyone felt as though they were on the same page. I think he's done well in kind of rooting out perhaps some of the difficult players that cause him problems. I think there's more of a feeling of togetherness. And I think that's been shown in the improvement of players on the pitch. I think someone like Fred feels as though he's more included on the pitch and in life in general at Carrington. And I think that's had its advantages on the pitch. But in terms of Jadon Sancho, I think he's a player that United have earmarked as being a player that they want. And I think, again, exploitation is not the right word, but it is kind of exploiting your position in the market in terms of being one of the big fish. You can afford a huge transfer fee like that, even in spite of what's happening with coronavirus. and also big wages, more wages than Jadon Sancho would be on at Borussia Dortmund. But kind of less cynically than that, you also look at the ingredients as well, the likes of Jesse Lingard and more importantly, Marcus Rashford being big mates, big pals of Jadon Sancho. I think you can see the ingredients are right. And also that Manchester United need to solve that problem, I think, of having a right-hand side that needs a real key player coming in. If you think Jadon Sancho comes in and you've got him on the right, you've got Marcus Rashford on the left or in the middle, and either or Anthony Martial, and backed up by that, you've got the likes of Matic, you've got Dan James, you've got Mason Greenwood, and pulling the strings, you've got Bruno Fernandes, and suddenly it doesn't start looking like a team that's scratching around to get into top 6 or top 4. It looks like a team that maybe has, within a year or two, perhaps title ambitions and those sort of dreams of bringing the sort of success that Manchester United fans have come to expect and now long for. It doesn't look too big a stretch of the imagination. We bring someone like Jadon Sancho in, that those sort of things will come to the fore. And I think that's why he fits the bill. What I don't know is how the market will change because of what we're seeing in terms of the financial state of clubs. Maybe Manchester United having more clout financially will become more attractive to other teams who haven't got as much money in their coffers, or whether the PR of it, and certainly I suggested that someone earlier today, will mean that Manchester United and other clubs don't want to spend as much money in a whole situation where millions of pounds have currently taken on a different significance in life and in this fight against this virus.
What about the situation of the Champions League football, or lack of, whereas Manchester United are concerned? Look, we look like we've got all but 2 feet in the quarterfinals of the Europa League with that 5-0 win against Linz. But we don't know if that competition is going to return. Is it going to get scrapped? And even if everything does return, we could fall off the back of the wagon, not finish 4th, and I don't want to put it into the atmosphere, but not win the Europa League either. Would that be a decisive factor for Sancho?
Yeah, it might be, but only in the sense that it's kind of another sort of jewel in the crown, and Manchester United's crown looks better than it has for some time. I think it's still more appealing. I talked about the transfer fee being what Borussia Dortmund will want. There's no doubt about that. I think the wages won't be a problem either. And then I think you look at the situation, when Manchester United broke the world transfer record to bring in Paul Pogba, that was under Jose Mourinho. He brought in a few other Mino Raiola's boys. And they all came in on the strength of it being Jose and it being a project. And at that stage, they weren't in the Champions League, they were in the Europa League, and yet the big names still came. And I think that is the draw of Manchester United. I think one thing that maybe is easy to forget when we talk about finances, of course, if United miss out on Champions League for 2 seasons in a row, then Adidas pay less in terms of their sponsorship. So it means there are less in the coffers, bearing in mind we don't know when the season is going to start. We don't know when the transfer window is going to be. So I think the whole thing is fluid. But I think it will force Manchester United and a lot of clubs to kind of look at what they have got, spend their time looking at their squad and thinking, do I really need to make those huge purchases in 2 or 3 positions? Or can I maybe buy a couple of players and get by with what I've got already, especially in United's case, which is kind of better than it was sort of 6 months ago.
I think from a United fan perspective, I think we've seen Daniel James come in and do okay. We've seen his limitations because it's a big jump for him. We know that some fans really don't think he's all that. Other fans can see he's been trying hard and getting into great positions and being direct. But definitely the likes of Jadon Sancho in that right-hand side position, if you add that in with Martial and Rashford, looks frightening. So is that for you on your end? Would you say that that's definitely the priority, or are Manchester United looking at other areas as well as just important as that area?
No, I think that is a priority. And as I say, you look at the 3 of them together, Martial, Rashford and Jadon Sancho, you have to say that's as good a strike force anywhere in the world, and certainly probably the quickest strike force anywhere in the world. Yeah. And what it doesn't just do isn't just score goals, it creates goals for the rest of the team as well. I think it's interesting you raised the point on Dan James. I like him because he plays football I did, which is a bit like Forrest Gump, run really, really fast.
Kick and run, right?
Yeah, and have kind of an unpredictable end product. If anyone plays football with me, they're marvelous so fast, but there's nothing at the end of it. And I think he suffers from that a little bit. I've got to say, at the start of the season, people have short memories in football. He was the only bright thing about Manchester United.
Was, yeah.
The 3 goals in the first 4 games meant that, the fact it was a torrid start to the season wasn't quite so bad, because you thought you discovered someone who could be as good as Ryan Giggs. I think it will come. I think he's a work in progress. I think it's his 2nd full season. As I've said to you many times before, playing Manchester United, or for Manchester United at the start of last season, or this season as it was, sorry, not an easy place to be. Add to that, it's your second season in football. It's your first season in the Premier League. I think all in account, he's not done too badly. And I think also, he's had to play more games because of injury and because of his own success than was really thought when they paid 15 million for him. But in terms of structuring elsewhere, I think a midfielder will be an interesting situation in terms of what you're looking for a midfielder to do. And I think that will be defined by whether Paul Pogba stays or goes. We can talk about that certainly in a minute or two.
Yeah, that's definitely going to come.
I would say that you don't need a right back. You don't need a left back. I think Brandon Williams, for me, has been the success story of the season, apart from Bruno. I'm sure we'll talk about it again. But if you're talking about the credentials of a success story being homegrown, well, Brandon Williams has blown me away, quite simply. And I had a chat with him 6 or 7 weeks ago about various things, and I thought he's a similar age to one of my sons.
That's
I
crazy.
Thought, well, I thought I'd deal with him in the way I would deal with my sons. So I tried to be cheeky and said, I loved it when Mahrez megged you on the touchline. And he sort of looked at me like he wanted to kill me, and then said, well, where did the ball go? The ball went out, didn't it?
Love that. Love that, Brandon.
It's a shame it didn't go out in the interview, but it tells you everything you need to know about that kid. He's got his head switched on. And I think just because he's got some character, he's got some fight, and he's not bad as a player, and he scored that really crucial goal at Sheffield United.
Yeah, brilliant goal.
And rescued it into a kind of acceptable point in sort of South Yorkshire. I think he's been brilliant. So no left back, no right back needed. I think probably a centre back. I think if you can get a real world class centre back in alongside Harry Maguire, I think you'll see even more from Harry Maguire. And
what is it about Lindelof that people just don't? Why is that jury still out? Obviously, Bailly with the injuries, Tuanzebe injured, but he definitely wanted to be second in command. The fact that Solskjaer kept him, brought him back off loan from Villa, because he could have just played for Villa for another year, really. But the fact that he brought him back means he obviously thought highly of him. Where do you think this question mark stems from as to the best partner for Harry Maguire? And why isn't it Lindelof? Or why don't you think fans think it's Lindelof?
I don't know. I think at the moment, I think they've made the best of an okay situation. I won't say a bad situation. That sounds an awful thing to say. Bearing in mind 9 clean sheets in the last 12 games, that's not done by chance. They've worked really well in tight partnership. But I think Harry Maguire is someone who benefits from people taking a little bit of the load off him. I think we've seen that in terms of leadership with Bruno coming in. The guy's a natural leader. We saw that in Austria. He's demanding the best from people around him. He's telling them what he wants them to do. He's congratulating them when they do stuff well. He's having a go at them when they do stuff wrong. And I think that's taken a little bit of the load off Harry Maguire as a leader, which means we're seeing more of a player. I think Maguire is still looking alongside him and looking at Victor Lindelof and thinking, am I going to be running another 10 or 15 yards because you're going to make a rick in the next 5 minutes? I see it. And I like him as well. And I think Lindelof's not a bad player. But I think equally, you'd like to see United in a situation where if Lindelof is the first choice centre-back alongside Maguire, that he's got someone really, really nipping at his toes. Bailly can do that. For me, Bailly 100% is perhaps, if he could stay fit and give you 40 games, I don't think he can. Phil Jones, I think will look to find football somewhere else. I think United fans are pretty harsh on him, as most football fans. I think they'd also recognise the fact he always gives of his best and never gives anything short of that in a United shirt. I think Chris Smalling deserves to be playing football somewhere else. I'm a little bit biased because I like him and a lot of what he stands for. And I'm really pleased he's had a complete success story at Roma. I think that'll end up with either a move to Serie A with Roma or maybe in the Premier League with somebody else. And Tuanzebe, I think, is one for the future. I think they've been disappointed with the injury record this season, but I think he's got real credentials to be there. And you don't give somebody the captain's armband at, I think, 22 in the game against Rochdale in the Carabao Cup. You don't, unless you believe in the guy. So I think he's certainly got a real future. But I'd like to see someone that puts the cat amongst the pigeons a little bit. So the likes of Bailly, but Keeley, Victor Lindelof, think, blimey, I've got a real struggle on my hands to keep my place. Because I think at the moment, I think Lindelof probably thinks that's his shirt and nobody else's.
He's quite comfortable, isn't he? Moving into midfield, and we've got to talk about Paul Pogba. I mean, it's the saga that is always being spoken about. Even Ollie is always laughing at it. And you know what? I was in the press conference with yourself, and I asked Ollie, what can we expect Paul Pogba's future to look like in terms of would he be staying? And for me, it was the first time in a while he'd sort of said you can expect him to stay, and that seemed to be the story. Then, his brothers come out and said X, Y, Z, and Riola said this, which is the usual kind of saga. But with everything that's been going on with the pandemic and how it's going to affect the transfer market economically, Could that then see Pogba play that in line with the fact that Bruno's there now? He might be looking at it like, I could really make something happen with him, and Ollie can see just a different United being built now. Or do you think he could still leave?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think without becoming a broken record, I think that United is a kind of better place to football. I think there are more people smiling, more people risk, more people playing the sort of style of football, the quality of football that Paul Pogba would want to play. And I think on the other hand of things, I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's right, and he said that to me on numerous occasions. He's our player back. I think the problem with that is we've heard that time and time and time again. And the conspiracy theorists will tell you all sorts of things about what Paul Pogba's done this year. Well, the one thing I can tell you for a fact is he has played football for Manchester United. He's played 8 times. He's played twice since September, and he's not kicked a ball in a red shirt in 2020. So there are problems there. Clearly, I think Ollie wants to say that wants to be part of Manchester United, that wants to be one of his key players. And I think what maybe helps that economics, I'll come to that in a moment. But I think more importantly, I think, for the first 6 months of the season, people were asking about Paul Pogba because things weren't going well on the pitch. He was perceived to be perhaps a more important player in absence than he was playing for Manchester United. And I think, that's why Ollie got to those questions. That's why it became such a circus. I think as soon as Bruno arrives, as soon as things start picking up, then people are talking about Marcus Rashford scoring his wonderful goals, of Anthony Martial scoring more goals for Manchester United in the season he's managed his 5 years since coming and go. And then clearly it's about Bruno and it's about Odion Ighalo, the January arrivals as well. So the spotlight's a little bit off Paul Pogba, and he might benefit from that too. And then I think it's the economics. Manchester United will want between 100 and 150 million for him. And based on what I've just said about his appearance record, he hasn't shown anyone what he can do this season. So that's a really, really big gamble, even for some of the biggest teams in Europe. And that's what challenges that the current situation gives them financially. On top of that, he'll want probably more wages than he's paid by Manchester United. Again, that's a major question mark to a lot of clubs. And I think at the moment, right, the power has shifted. I think Manchester United probably have more power in the situation with Paul Pogba than Paul Pogba does. And I don't think you can say that maybe he arrived back in Manchester for a second time. Is Pogba 2.0, if you like. So I think there are more reasons for him to stay. I'd also, from a kind of selfish, biased perspective, I think, and I don't know if United fans can this, I think you'd be a much stronger proposition with him playing on the pitch. I think he can do things with the football that few top-line players can do. Absolutely. And I think the idea of him playing alongside someone like Fred, someone like Matic or McTominay, tandem with Bruno Fernandes, with those three that we talked about potentially up front as well, that's proper frightening stuff. That's looking like a team that could win a World Cup rather than just a Premier League. So I'm hoping all those things maybe just are going through his mind as well. But I think the other solution to it might be that if United can't get kind of the sort of money they're looking for, and they need to get a player that can do the same sort of things as Pogba, but be kind of less high maintenance, is they might look for a swap deal. And it might be that the current market, with the way things are with coronavirus and finances we've talked about, swap deals might become more prevalent because it provides a solution for clubs who've got these super players that they can't get shifted.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see how that pans out with the Pogba saga. I mean, I was sort of resound to losing him sort of maybe 5-6 months ago, but from when Ollie said that you can expect him to stay, obviously coupled with the fact that the pandemic has been out there now, I just more see it as he probably will stay. Now, outgoings, Phil Jones, Chris Smalling probably have to come back, have to find something out for him. Alexis Sanchez, who I've just completely forgotten even plays for Manchester United. Lingard and Pereira not getting much game time since Bruno's come in. Could we see some high-profile exits? And also Marcus Rojo, forgot about him. He's on loan, but you've got to probably see him getting a permanent move away. What are the outgoings going to be looking like, do you reckon?
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I'll make it clear. I'd like Pogba to stay because I think life will be more fun with Pogba around. And I think, if they go sort of trajectory that I think Manchester United are going in, I think that he could really show that he is the world's, or one of the world's greatest players. And I don't think he's done that enough, perhaps, at Manchester United. Even he'd probably admit that. In terms of other things, it's funny, I'm writing a piece at the moment, which I think will go out next week on Sky's app, looking at comings and goings. So I won't try and show two of my hands.
Yeah, maybe not.
But in terms of that, I think, no, I think you're right. The players you've kind of earmarked are the ones who've got big question marks against them. I think Pereira, because he signed a new deal at the start of the season, I think probably has another season to prove that he can do something. But in doing that, to play for Manchester United in the position he to play, and you've got to be better than Bruno Fernandes. I don't see that happen. I see him being backup, but I can see him also getting sick of being that as well. So I think he'll get a chance, but I think that will probably be his last chance. And this time next year, we might be talking about him running out of chances and going somewhere else. I hope not. I hope he proves us all wrong. But I think he's given a lot of opportunities this season to do that and hasn't really taken them. In terms of Jesse Lingard, I think a lot of United fans, again, have short memories when it comes to what he's done for the club. I think he's given some amazing moments. I think he's scored some really important goals that won trophies for Manchester United. I can understand, some of the frustration towards him. I don't like the strength of it. I didn't like to see what I saw after Derby County. Deserves the kind of remarks. And, that there's no place in football for that. And I think whether they're United fans, Derby fans, or whatever, they were wrong in being human beings and doing that to somebody who just wears a Manchester United shirt. But he's a talented player. I think he's had a lot going on in the background. I think someone that looks the most free and easy player to talk to and watch at Old Trafford, he suddenly looks like he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. So I think from my point of view, and probably from a lot of kind of fair Manchester United fans, and I'm sure there are lots of those, I think they'd like to see him go and play football and be happy somewhere else. And I think if you can find that, I think they'll be looking to do that. I think Ollie has respect for him. I think he'd like to see it work, but it probably won't at United. So I think they'll try and find a situation that works for everybody, which is that he gets first team football somewhere else. Phil Jones, when I mentioned it before, again, length of contract is the big problem there. I think getting a sort of permanent deal might be quite challenging, but again, loans could work and he could still be a Premier League player somewhere else, but it won't happen at Manchester United. Chris Smalling, I've said, I think he'll be fine. I think he could stay at Manchester United, but probably wouldn't get the opportunities that he deserves at the moment. And I think there's a better player there than one that would wait around in the wings waiting for his opportunities. I think he'll be off somewhere else. Rojo, God, I mean, blimey.
I know, he just won't go.
And then the worst thing about it is that they get rid of him on loan, and because of what's happened, I think he's played once, I think, for Estudiantes. So he's had luck in that, but I can imagine that he'll perhaps remain in South America, and the only regret there will not be seeing the orange Rolls Royce in the Carrington training ground. That really is a grotesque piece of art,
an expensive piece of art.
It's everything wrong about footballers and their cars. And then Alexis Sanchez, which I think is a really, really interesting point. And I said I think lightning strikes 3 times in this interview because I repeat myself 3 times. I think United is a happier place to be than it was when Alexis Sanchez went. I think it's less of a goldfish bowl. I think there are players playing football better than they ever have since he arrived at the football club and trying to do things that maybe fit in with his kind of DNA, to use a Manchester United word. I think economics are difficult. They're paying him more than they've paid any other player in Manchester United's history. So actually getting rid of that is difficult because no one else is going to take that on. And I think, to be honest, if I was in his shoes, and I'm sure you're the same, it would be great to sacrifice that and be noble and say, look, I'll go and play for free. But if someone's paying you that sort of money, I think it's a really brave person that doesn't say for 2 or 3 years, I'd quite like some more of that, please. So it might be that they can try and get a loan sorted, but I don't think that'll happen simply because the Inter Milan thing hasn't worked for one reason or another, mainly injury. So I think he'll be given another chance to prove people wrong. And one thing you don't want to see is the Manchester United number 7 shirt just not being used and just sat there on the back of a player that doesn't want to play for Manchester United. So I think he'll get that opportunity. But again, the question is when does the next season start? And can Ole Gunnar Solskjaer get a tune out of him? Because if he starts playing like he played for Arsenal in the Premier League, then whether he starts at Manchester United or is an option from the bench, then that's some player to have. The problem is we just haven't seen that player, and he's looked almost like he's been cursed, like he's lost his magic lamp, like Aladdin, and doesn't know where it is and where his powers have gone.
That's it, mate. I'd liken him. I don't know if you've seen the film Space Jam, when they all put their hands on the ball and it just sucks the powers out of the basketball players, mate. That is Alexis Sanchez. I don't know what's happened to him. I said we needed to be right into trading standards to Arsenal because that's not the player that we saw on TV. That's not him. So I don't know what's happened there with him. But really interesting. Do you know what? I want to talk about young players because Dean Henderson, actually, I want to talk about because we're in a really interesting situation. And we'll get to Angel Gomez as well, another youngster, and Chong's just been given another contract extension. We'll talk about those. But on Dean Henderson, De Gea's just signed a big deal. Don't get me wrong, hasn't been at his sparkling best, which by his standards is so high, but he's still a fantastic keeper. But is there a interesting conversation for Ollie to have, a positive headache for him to have, as to speak? Because, you know, this next conversation he's going to have with Dean Henderson is going to be really key. It's either he says, actually, stay at Sheffield United a couple more years. I'll tell you now, but don't tell anyone. David is going to be on his way out in 3 years. Or does he say, sorry, mate, it's kind of the wrong time. Go off and do your thing. And then if we meet again, we meet again. Where do you think that will go?
I think it is a tricky conversation. I think it's probably one that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is thinking about. I think if it was me, I would sell it to him on development. I said, look, you know, this is where we want you for your development, because you are going to be the number one for Manchester United in maybe 2 or 3 years' time, but it doesn't come quite yet. I think at 22, Dean Henderson has got the opportunity to be patient with it. I think, again, hard to be patient if you think I've got a shot of being Manchester United's goalkeeper. But equally, you know, he's a switched on human being. He knows what's going on in the world. He knows that, you know, other than Alexis Sanchez, there probably isn't any other person than David De Gea is being paid more by Manchester United. You know, that's a big contract. And it's not a contract you pay for somebody to sit on the bench and be your number 2 or number 3. So, you know, I think De Gea will be number 1 next season. I think there's an argument that says give him competition, because perhaps Romero doesn't give him that competition. He thinks he's settled in that. But it would be a waste, I think, for Dean Henderson to come back and be that kind of competitive element in terms of that. I think, you know, if he plays, I don't know, 35, maybe even 45 games with Sheffield United, and this time next year people are talking about him playing in the Euros like they are now, then I think that's probably a better duty of care than bringing him back to Manchester United, where he sits and watches more football than he plays. And I think that's how the conversation will probably go. I mean, Sheffield United, that'll be music to their ears. They'll be delighted to get a Manchester United, you know, potential number 1 goalkeeper as their number 1. Equally, I think, you know, David De Gea knows his defence well. He works with it well. You're right. He's not had the 2 years that he would have liked to have had, and certainly at the start of the season had a pretty torrid time. He's come back with the rest of the team, you know, really, really well. Romero is, you know, as we said before, you know, one of the best goalkeepers in the world in terms of being a number 2.
Yeah, brilliant.
He's got more clean sheets than De Gea this season. So I think the structure's in place there, and I think all it requires is probably a bit of sense and probably some kind words from Ollie face to face with Dean Henderson, but also perhaps some people like you and me saying this is how good he is, but for his own good and for the good of Manchester United, it's probably best that he stays on loan. But I don't think that's an easy one to have, because if it was me, you know, I want to have a go at the big job. I want to try and be Manchester United number 1. It's whether he can be patient enough to want to do that, or whether even he just says, look, if you don't fancy me as a number 1, maybe I go somewhere else. That can't be allowed to happen. So I think there is some negotiation to be had there. But I think the simple fact of the matter is that David De Gea is going to be number 1 next season. He'll be wearing that number 1 shirt, and he will be the senior goalkeeper.
Absolutely, and I think that's the key there. Is if one of the other big teams come in for him, because, you know, let's say, you know, Lampard, for example, is not really getting on with Kepa. You could maybe see him looking at something. Lampard could go, I'll tell you what, well, we'll pay 50, 60 million for Dean Henderson now. We believe in him. And then that would put Manchester United in a really, really difficult situation to see how that pans out. So I think there are some really interesting times to come with the Dean Henderson situation. But yeah, for now, De Gea definitely will be number 1. Angel Gomez. Chong signed a new... go on.
So I think the interesting point there is that, you know, we lament the fact that there isn't a European Championships this summer. I think for United, in terms of Dean Henderson, that might be a really good idea, that he didn't go across with England, that people really good, nice things about him, that he doesn't get a chance to play in a big game against some big teams, because maybe, you know, they get the benefit of that he stays on loan and out of the sort of proper kind of spotlight, and it allows them to keep him somewhere where he will develop and be the number 1 that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and the rest of the crew at Manchester United think he could be. Absolutely.
Gomez, still yet to sign a new deal. I know he came out with some comments last week, I think it was. But it kind of feels like he hasn't been seen as much as maybe, say, Chong. Probably not much in it. But he's a player that it looks like he's got promise, especially at under 23 levels, which can always it's always a good thing to see that. But obviously, you want to see them judged at the top level before you can make that decision. But do you envisage him signing a deal similar to Chong and staying and maybe getting a loan or something like that? Or?
Yeah, I think that's more likely. I think it's interesting. I've watched him play for the under-23s a few times, and he stood out. He pulls the strings. He's a really, really good player in that environment. And then, I've waited and watched for him to do it in the first team for Manchester United. And albeit he's not started the Premier League game yet, and I guess at 19 it's a big ask anyway. But when he has, he's not really done what I thought he would do. He's not the biggest. He's got quick feet, but not really quick feet. And he can travel, but he's not really pacey. So he's almost, I hate making comparisons about players because it's hard to live up to the sort of ability of someone like Paul Scholes. But in terms of stature, he's a similar sort of person.
Yeah.
I think that environment-wise, they're the best place for him to develop. As I say, he still is only young. I would think it's likely that he will say yes, bearing in mind I think 6 of the academy have come through in the last 13 months and signed new deals. And as you say, Tahith Chong being the latest of those to do that. So I think the conditions are right. But I think, like a few of the other players, he probably does need a loan just to kind of toughen him up, but also just to give him, football, first team football up against men.
Yeah,
on
exactly.
And I think Tahith Chong can benefit from that too. I know he's pacey, and I quite like the exciting way it goes about it. And it's going to sound an awful thing at the moment, but the most exciting thing for me about Tahith Chong is his hair at the moment. I shouldn't be saying that about a Manchester United player. But in saying that, he's also got to be given a chance to do something. And I think that's why perhaps a loan would work. And it was interesting in the sort of statements made by him and also by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer when the contract was agreed. Both of them talked about his work ethic and said it was strong, which gives you kind of the belief that he can really be somebody. But I think there's a toughening up exercise needed. And I think it doesn't benefit these players maybe to play a little bit of Europa League football, a bit of Carabao Cup football. I think if they played in the Championship or maybe even went abroad and played a season or a couple of seasons like Pereira did, then maybe it might be of benefit to Manchester United. Because at the moment, in those two cases, you can't see quite the development that makes a real firm argument for them to be sort of permanent members of a squad that's starting to shape up and look like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Manchester United fans expect it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's weird because I think the Chong situation is, he did kind of flatter to deceive. I think the only time I've seen him play well-ish this season was probably away at Wolves in the first, when we had them in the FA Cup. Then obviously it went to a replay because that was 0-0, but he did okay in that game. But he just looked like he's flattered to deceive. So I'm more leaning on the side of actually maybe loans are good for these players. One player who's done really well coming through the ranks. I know you spoke about Brandon Williams, so no loan there. But Mason Greenwood, if you bring in a Sancho or another forward of a type, he's proved he can score goals at the top level. Okay, not Champions League, but I'm talking about Premier League and all the games he's been asked to play in. Got double figures this year. Could there be a decision to be made about him? Not next season, but in terms of if Ighalo stays for another couple of years, they bring in a Sancho, they've got Dan James. Could Greenwood maybe go, actually, I've got double figures pretty much every time I play. I can play. Send me on loan, or would it be best for him to stay in that environment and just get the balance right?
Yeah, I think before I answer that question, you love the Ighalo thing, don't you? You got that right.
Mate, it was so weird. He's been so good. I don't think. Well, let's talk about Ighalo. Actually, we'll get back to Greenwood. Let's go with Ighalo. Like, at the time, we stood outside Old Trafford. It was Slimani, it was Cavani, it was Josh King, it was Solomon Rondon, it was everyone, and then it ended up being Ighalo. And then it was like, what's going on here? But he's a fan favorite. He loves the club. He's just so happy to be here. And now we're already talking about giving him an extension.
Yeah, I didn't realise. Well, first, you credit you thought more than I did, and I hold my hands up and say that was. And I didn't expect, if it did happen, that people would be saying he's proved everybody wrong. You look at the fact that on the night, I think he was trending on Twitter worldwide because people were having a go at it. Well, show us your medals now, boys and girls, because Odion Ighalo has proved to be the real deal. He loves the club as much as you do. And I asked him a few weeks ago about staying, and he said it was up to him, he'd stay forever. So, the ingredients
forever.
are right there. And
he said he'd stay forever.
it's a big word, but he loves Manchester United, and it's great to see a player playing for your football club who does that. It doesn't happen every day of the week, and I think he scores goals the moment Marcus Rashford and Anthony Martial struggle to score, and that sounds like an awful slight. What I mean by that, and Ollie's talked about it as well, is the kind of dangerous goals where 6-yard box, you're putting yourself in some sort of peril or harm, and you're having to be brave to put the ball in the back of the net. You look at those 2 goals at Derby County, not the biggest game and not the most important game of the season, but they came from nothing, and they weren't, glittering goals, the sort of goals you play over and over again when you sat on the coach on the way back to Manchester, but they were important goals. And I think that's what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer sees in him, that he can teach the likes of Rashford, the likes of Martial, of course, Mason Greenwood, about those extra 4 or 5 goals a season that take you from 16 or 17 into the 20s, and who knows, into the late 20s, and that's even early 30s. Because I don't think that's beyond someone like Marcus Rashford if he stays fit for a season. So I can see Ighalo staying, because I can see that conversation being a fairly easy one. I think economics are interesting again. He gets a fortune at Shanghai, but he doesn't support Shanghai. He doesn't love Shanghai. He loves Manchester United, and I think that's probably the most compelling argument there. So I think they've done really, really well with that, and you've done really well as well. And I, again, hold my hands up and say, look, I know the guy did all his fitness work for him the first couple of weeks when he came over to Manchester, when everyone thought that he was going to be some sort of health threat. The only health threat he's been is to other defences. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely,
and,
yeah, he's brilliant.
And the guy did his fitness work with him at the Taekwondo Centre in Manchester. Just said, look, he's in tip-top condition. He loves Manchester United. He's going to prove everybody wrong, and he has done that, including me. So,
do you know what? I'm not going to stand here, or sit here, should I say, and be like, I always knew we'd get him. He's going to be phenomenal. But I did look, from his time at Watford. Obviously, he did show he was a bit of a player. I don't think any of us could really say we've been keeping an eye on him while he's in China. I think you'd be lying if you said that. But I don't know. I just thought he had attributes in there. But I was one of the ones on Twitter, to be fair. I'll hold my hands up. I was sort of like, not more on his part, but more of Manchester United. It just showed a lack of organisation. It showed chaos. It showed, that they were panicking because, it looked like we had Haaland in the bag, and it looked like from when that move didn't materialise, they were going, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do?
But I think there was an element of that as well. I don't think it was a science in any way. I think they were looking to get a body. I think Josh King was someone they were looking very seriously at. I think this came sort of left field. But you have to say it, whether it was a panic buy, whether it was them scrabbling around. You've got to say, of the 5 transfers that they've made with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as kind of permanent manager at Manchester United, it's 5 ticks against 5 names, and 5 names that have changed the complexion of that Manchester United squad and made it more of a proposition in terms of playing better football, playing winning football, and winning trophies. You've got to say, recruitment-wise, it looks as though United, I think they got lucky a little bit on Ighalo. I don't think anyone would say they've done their due diligence to a perfect extent, but maybe getting 4 right, a bit of luck as well.
Did we get lucky with Bruno in terms of, if Scott McTominay and Paul Pogba didn't get injured when they did, would we have even got him in January?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I get told a lot that it was going to be a summer signing they were looking to do so in this summer. So, it's one that was brought forward. And I think, people should look at the next window, whenever it is, with that in mind. I don't think it will be the 4 or 5 players that maybe some people wish it will be. I think it might be 2 key positions. There may be 3 players. But again, that depends very much, I think, on what happens with Paul Pogba, whether he stays or goes. But I think Fernandes has just been incredible. I think they knew he could do a job on the pitch. They knew that box to box, there was no problem whatsoever. But we're talking about a player that's never played Premier League football, that's never played at a club as big as Manchester United, just walking into the place and owning it. Not owning it in a bad way where people look at him, but owning it in a way where suddenly he's demanded more from his teammates. He's demanded that they raise their standards, and he's just galvanised the whole place. And it's not just on the pitch, it's off it as well. He demands the best from everybody around him. And, it's really nice to see someone like that who's changed the way that Manchester United play and the way the place feels as well. I think he's had a massive effect on the training field. I think, Diogo Dalot feels as though he's included now simply because of the language.
His best pal, yeah. Brings him lunch boxes and stuff today.
He might think more seriously about staying at Manchester United. I think there's no coincidence that Fred, it feels more in the groove with someone like Bruno alongside. I don't think he'll ever score a free kick, even though he stands next to him. I hope he does, and again proves me wrong. That'd be great. But it's nice to think, in terms of him, he hasn't let his guard slip at all. He's not let that smile slip, and he's had some real challenges. Coming over here for more than 50 million from Shakhtar, and quite honestly, the first season stinking the place out. And it's a lot of players would have gone home with their tail between their legs and said, "This isn't for me," and he hasn't done that. And I think he deserves a lot of credit. He's still not the player I think that Manchester United thought they signed, but you can see perhaps he's getting towards that. And it just feels like I've said to you before, I play FIFA with the boys and my two sons, and I know you laugh at me like that. A guy said,
can't imagine you playing FIFA.
They hate me if I beat them, and I would love to be able to play against them with my team, Ipswich Town. But League One's
but if you're good enough on FIFA, you can make it happen.
Well, no, yeah, I'd have to be a miracle. But I play as United, and as United at the moment is just brilliant. You play Fernandes as number 10, you play him in behind Rashford, and the two of them are just poetry together. So if they're getting it right on FIFA, it means they're probably getting it right on Trafford as well.
Mate, my career mode, I've got Sancho on the right, Thomas Partey next to Pogba, Bruno Fernandes, and then Martial and Rashford. It is solid, mate. It is brilliant.
Yeah, and I've got to say also credit to Anthony Martial as well, because I wouldn't be his biggest fan. I think he frustrates. I think he I'm surprised he's still at Manchester United in many ways. We're talking about 5 years, but maybe it's been a work in progress. He's only 24 still. It's 5 years, and he's had his best season so far for goals. And again, he's doing things he hasn't been doing. He's tracking back. He's putting it about running it. I'm sure I saw him tackle somebody, maybe in Austria, but maybe in a
and he did that. He done a header away as well, clearance against City, I think it was.
But his behaviour is changing. I think Manchester United fans who had doubts about him who thought, well, is he for us? I think they're starting to see a player there. And again, it's signs that it's an easier place to play, and it's a place where people are beginning to start to take risks on the pitch. And again, that's something that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has talked about a lot. Not playing it safe, not hiding from the ball. And I think Martial has done that for on many occasions. Has become almost an invisible person at Old Trafford. He's not invisible now. He's loud and proud and looks to be enjoying his football. So I think whether he's got hair or whether he's bald, I think we'll be pleased to see him back as well.
I'm not going to lie, mate. I've always been in Martial FC, me. I've always thought he could be a player. I agree.
He divides people, doesn't he?
He does. It's a little bit like maybe not like Marmite, but there are a lot of people who say no, sell him. We can find better. Not up to the races. Lazy, disinterested. Then you get the other camp that's like, I don't know what they're seeing, mate. He is a proper player, and he's our best forward.
You then see him score, a goal like he does and can score, and you think there is something there.
Yeah,
there's something really.
Absolutely.
You just want to see it on more of a consistent basis.
Yeah, exactly. Last couple of things before we wrap up. I just want to talk about not to get too political, but footballers have been in the spotlight, been dug out really by the Health Secretary Matt Hancock. Since then, they've come out with their initiative that they're going to do for funding for the NHS, which is fantastic. A lot of footballers doing a lot of good out there. Do you feel that football's been a little bit picked on or been used as a scapegoat with what's been going on? Yes, they earn vast amounts of money, huge sums. But how have you perceived that side of it?
Yeah, I didn't like it. I don't like kind of football being a political football, if you like to use mixed metaphors and things like that. I think it's really poor. I think the problem that it kind of ignores, and it's not one maybe that we want to talk about with Manchester United, is that for League One and League Two players, this is going to be a real problem. Football's got to sort itself out and make sure that the players can still pay their mortgages at that level, that football clubs don't go out of business. And then further up the scale, I did an interview with Marcus Rashford last week. He's talking about supporting kids who get free school meals, and this is somebody who benefited from something like that when he was at school. Players have competencies. Players know what's going on. It's pointed out to me that a lot of players spend an awful lot of their money looking after their friends, looking after their family. And I don't mean just taking them out for meals and that sort of thing. I mean,
financially dependent.
I mean, things like paying car finance. I mean, things like paying the mortgages on their mum and dad's homes. And I'm not trying to make them out to be angels or anything like that, but nor do they deserve politicians coming and pointing the finger at them when we're talking about a conservative government, without getting political, where a lot of these guys have friends who are hedge fund managers or traders in the stock exchange,
way richer than footballers.
No one's pointing fingers at them simply because they're worried the market's going one way rather than the other. So to cut through all that, I think what the players did on Saturday with their talks to the Premier League and the clubs was incredible. The statement was really powerful. It basically said, two fingers to the government. We're going to show you, we're going to prove you wrong. It was a really interesting process. In fact, they wrote the statement themselves. The captains then went back on WhatsApp groups to their teammates, got it signed off, and we've heard, of course, that the tweets last night from Jordan Henderson, from Harry Maguire, have said that the whole thing's been set up. But I think what football now needs to see in terms of getting the message through to the community is, where's the money? How big a kind of pool or fund is it going to be? And I think that needs to get out soon, so people realise that not only the players proved people wrong, but they proved people wrong in a big way, and a way that could make people's lives and the whole fight against this coronavirus thing, a more easier fight, if you like, certainly for those at the front line, because to kind of portray football as not being human beings when a lot of these guys are young with families is just nonsense. And I think the players were within their rights to come back with the sort of ferocity they came back with. But having said that, there are still instances where players, certainly from a journalistic point of view, aren't letting the papers down, are they?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that is probably one of the big sides to it. I know obviously the players that you're talking about, but players just being kind of irresponsible and breaking those lockdown rules, it just kind of puts them into the wrong end of the spotlight, and then probably makes some people go, actually, they should be given this and they should be given that. I mean, my thing with it is that, look, I haven't seen anybody say that Ed Sheeran should be doing this, that, and the other. I haven't seen anyone say that George Clooney should be doing this, or Jennifer Aniston, or these are high-profile people. Lewis Hamilton's a Formula 1 racer. No one said anything to him. Tiger Woods, like, there's other sports people out there, LeBron James, etc., etc. So I just think that to just use football as that, I thought was a really easy thing to do. Yes, I get it. They earn vast amounts of money that they don't ask to. The money that they earn is reflective of the industry that they're in. That's why they're on that much money. But yeah, I thought it was a little bit of a cheap shot from Matt Hancock just to go at them, because then what you do get is a snowball effect, which is other people going, actually, yeah, he earns 300 grand a week. Surely he can give 50,000.
You're right. That becomes really dangerous. And I think, from a Manchester United's perspective, I think, their conscience is clear as a club. I think they acted really quickly.
Yes.
We saw in Austria, they compensated the fans that went over to Linz that didn't have a game and get paid for accommodation, and each got enough money to have a really good night in Linz, not watching a football match. And on top of that, with the stuff with the casual pay and all the stuff in and around that, I think United have got their kind of conscience clear and have moved as quickly as anybody has in football. So I think that's been really impressive. And in terms of Ed Sheeran, you leave him alone, because I want him to take it over. Stuff it too, and it's my dream that he takes over Richard Town and makes it again.
Listen, nothing against Ed Sheeran. I'm just saying he's probably more wealthy than a lot of these footballers. You don't realise how much these guys get, and women get in the music industry. And no one's saying his name. That's all I'm saying.
He's got a job to do. Great again. So I can play with him.
Listen, James, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, as always, man. I hope that you're keeping your spirits high in isolation as well, and it can be difficult. And there's talks of obviously the isolation or lockdown, as they say, being extended, which you could probably agree with. We're not going to be coming out of lockdown anytime soon, I don't think. But are you keeping your mind fresh and just keeping the spirits high?
Yeah, I think so. I think the running, as I said, is really important. I run every morning, and that just kind of sets us up for the day. And whatever happens in terms of whether lockdown gets worse or better, I just pray that we're still allowed that kind of hour where we can do stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and have a walk with my family now. And I think that's the really nice thing about it. I think the family's become really important. At the end of it, if we're all kind of closer, then great. I think that's fantastic. I think what we don't know is when kind of football will be back. We don't know when this season will happen again, or what next season will be. Long the transfer window will be. We're all guessing at this stage. But I think what you can sort of say from the United perspective is that they look equipped not only to do business in the transfer window, but they look equipped to be a better proposition next season at home and abroad. So send my love to Josh. The camera work's been even better than without it.
All we need is a little couple of webcams on laptops and phones now. Josh is extinct.
And you could save on the foreign trips, you see, as well.
I'm just going to be doing them off my phone now. That's it.
So send my love to Josh. Have a very happy Easter, and we'll catch up really soon.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Enjoy the walk with the family, and we'll speak again really soon. Appreciate it, James.
All right, take care.
Nice one, mate. Thank you very much.